I'm so glad to be here. As Lori said, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and through a mutual acquaintance, we sat down and started talking about brand and reputation. And about 5 minutes in, Lori and I had both taken several pages of notes. A couple of more minutes in, we had more notes, and before we knew it, what had started out as maybe a 15 or 20-minute presentation in the works turned into a series. And I think that you'll see that today. We're going to just top line a lot of what's going on within branding and within technology, but what you'll find is that you can really deep dive into any of those topics. And I hope that when we get to the Q&A a little bit later, that you'll just ask me whatever's on your mind. I'll tell you right now, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a tech geek or guru. I'm somebody that is learning to adapt to technology and use it in my day-to-day life, as well as in my business and with our clients. So with that, I'm going to jump in on the presentation and try to get you some top line so that you can take this to work this afternoon and start applying these principles. So we're going to see if I'm ambidextrous here. 2 hands, mic and clicker. Okay, my first question, what time is it? Anybody know what time it is? Where? And how do we know this? iPhone? Anybody look at their watch? I'm still wearing a watch. I'm not sure if I'm wearing a watch just because it's habit or it's a fashion accessory, but it's still there, even though I can tell time a lot of different ways. Since the beginning of time, to use that cliche, people have wanted to know what time it is. And whether we used the sun and the stars to tell us that it was daytime or nighttime, or whether we looked to the seasons to know what time of year it was, we had a way of figuring things out. Fast forward many hundreds, thousands of years later, someone figured out how to take a whole bunch of gears and little gizmos and things that to this day I don't know the name of, and they put them together and they figured out how to track time. Okay, very few people know how to make the watch. Very few people could tell you how the watch is made. But we all still know how to tell time. And we know what the watch can do. We know what really fancy watches can do. So if you get into those iBands and Fitbits, we know it can give you infinite information and answer all of the questions. So I'm going to give away the first takeaway of today's presentation. You do not need to know how to make the watch. You don't need to know what makes it tick. You just need to know what it can do for you. And the same is true with technology. I look around this room and I see Grace over here, our executive intern for the summer for Richfield. She's one of the few people that is truly a digital native. She's part of this new generation. What year were you born? 2003. 2003. So she is part of Generation Z. That is past the millennials. The millennials are aging out. Gen Z is 1997 forward. This is the first generation that has grown up using computers, using technology, you name it. My 18-year-old, when he was in preschool, first day sat down and was surfing the internet to use little programs that they had at Kinderberry Hill. And I looked at it like, how do you know how to do this? They just know. So today, on my Facebook, I was reminded that it's an anniversary. 11 years ago today, I started Facebook. Facebook's been around a little bit longer than that. As many of you know, Facebook started out as a college app. It was a way for students to connect. Mark Zuckerberg took the idea of faces, names, addresses, basic information, and said, we can do better than a print booklet. We can use technology. Well, what you're reading here is a true post. This is with my daughter. She's 29, she's a mom, she's married. But the first time I went on Facebook, I thought, well, I'll do what you're supposed to do. I'll give her a poke. She didn't know who I was. She thought my profile was really lame. She was creeped out, like, who are you? You couldn't possibly be here. Facebook is for college students. Today, My 89-year-old dad knows what Facebook is. He doesn't use it, but his 89-year-old wife uses it all the time. Technology has a way of shifting. What starts out in one place migrates. We all know that today, Facebook is the platform that many of us, boomers, Xers, and millennials, less extent to millennials, are using. New forms of communication and messaging are taking over. Snapchat is the really popular one with the teens and the tweens. So we just have to remember that as we go through, whatever seemed foreign is going to become really commonplace. When we think about communication, and this is where I'm going to just talk theory for 1 minute, there's a cool theory called diffusion. And diffusion talks about where you are in your mind. Every idea starts with awareness. You have to know that something is possible. Once you know it's possible, then you'll decide if you're interested. Does this matter to me? Is this something that I might use? Is it something I would consider? What might I do with it? Awareness, interest, trial. At that point, you're going to decide, I'm going to give it a whirl. So son Joe, the 18-year-old, the one that uses Snapchat, he's going off to college in August. He communicates on Snap. He's going to teach me how to snap because that's how he communicates and that's going to be the best way. By the time he graduates, who knows? But it's about giving something a try. Once you try it, you make a decision. You evaluate it. Did I like it? Did it fit? Did it work? Is it for me? Am I comfortable with it? And ultimately, you decide if you're going to adopt it. So you go through this whole process. That's really key because the ideas, they're going to keep changing, but the way you come to ideas and the way that you come to decisions, those are the basics. So the first part of today's presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the basics of branding and reputation. The reason I'm going to do this is because no matter how much technology changes, we still have to convey stories, we still have to convey key ideas. This morning in my email, one of my industry publications that I get talked about the idea that who you're trying to reach and how you're trying to reach them has not really changed. We're always going to have new ways of doing it. The number of platforms out there today is in the thousands. Most of them don't make it, but everybody comes out with something new. Quite a few people are on LinkedIn, but you start getting invitations for, hey, join my this network, join my that. Everybody's trying to find something new, something different. Maybe they will. Once we get through some of the basics of branding, messaging, reputation, I'm going to jump in and provide you with some very current insights on technology. There's a survey that was just completed, some really neat statistics just in terms of what people are spending on and what it means for the workplace. And then I'm going to talk about moving forward and how you can take that information and use it. So brand and reputation. Interestingly, if you're a marketing person or communications person, and I ask you, what is it? You might spit back a textbook definition. I ask my students, I'm an adjunct at Metropolitan State University, what's branding? What's reputation? What's journalism? What's PR? What's marketing? And they usually give me some sort of formulaic response. Maybe it's something they've learned in a class or it's something that they've put together. And I say, okay, I want you to go out, I want you to ask a peer, I want you to ask a coworker, and I want you to ask your mother. Do you know who generally gets the question right on what's brand and what's reputation? Mom. Moms get it, and here's why. Basic definition. A brand is a promise. A brand is a promise. When you see a logo for McDonald's or Starbucks, you have an idea of what you're going to get. You know what that experience is going to be like. You know what to expect. Is it going to cost a lot, not cost a lot? You have an idea. And that organization, that product, that service has made a promise to you. At McDonald's, you know that you're going to get a fast burger. It's maybe not going to be the best burger you've ever had. It may or may not be the most nutritious, but you're going to get it. You're going to get it fast, and it's going to be hot, and it's going to be the same whether you get that burger in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, or you get it in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's consistent. And that's another key part about branding. Good branding is consistent. Reputation is whether or not you deliver on the promise. And that's what Mom understands. If you make a promise, you better keep the promise, because if you don't keep the promise, you're in trouble. We see it all the time. When you see the headlines and you read about organizations or individuals, to pick any organization, any individual that you want. Some are very active on Twitter, some were in the news just this morning. They make promises. We make judgments based on our experience as to whether or not they live up to those promises. And that is the reputation that they carry. Very simple. Make a promise, keep a promise. When you do that, nobody gets in trouble, everybody knows what to expect, things go well. All right, so how do we get to this? Well, let's talk about branding for a minute. There are brands, there are relationships, those are all the touch points, and there's that reputation. Do people believe it? A brand is a lot more than your logo. It's a lot more than your tagline. It's a lot more than the colors that you choose. Those are all very important things, and organizations spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about what those should be. If you're just starting a company or a new business, small business owner, you think about, what should I call my company? I thought about that. I call my company Pineapple. Secret, one of the reasons I do that is so people ask me why. It starts a conversation, and I've got an answer for them. We think about colors, we think about taglines, but there's a lot more that goes into it. It always starts with gathering information, and then it starts with filtering that information and figuring out what's important. Brands exist in different places. They always start at the very top. They start with core values, they start with mission, they start with purpose. They start about what something is at its core. And the same is true. Brands have different dimensions. We have organizational brands, we have product and service brands, we have individual brands as people. The CEO brand is something that we talk about a lot. We all know the CEOs of different large companies because they're out there making a face for themselves and using technology to do so, because they can't talk to you face to face. They're not going to talk to you one-on-one unless you happen to be in the C-suite. Okay, there are also things like employer branding. What kind of company is this? Do I want to work for this company? Is it a good company? Is it a company that treats its employees fairly? Is it a company that's good in the community? Today in the newspaper I read, and you've probably read this too, small towns around Minnesota are turning to branding. So now all of a sudden we have community branding. So anytime you get into branding and discussions, you're just going to start at that core. What is it about our brand that's true? What is the promise that we're making? What can people count on? What can we do consistently? What's going to be relevant? What's going to be distinct? Once you get to that, then you start to move into the identity. And that's the things that people recognize. That's where people start to say, oh, I know that blue stands for this. I know that the swoosh is for Nike. I got the shorthand and I understand it. And I don't even have to have the whole piece in front of me to know what it's about. That's really where technology started to help, because think how many times images flash up and they're on your screen or you see them on your phone. You've been able to make that connection really quickly. And then lastly, it's that experience. Once you've developed that brand platform, then you start to take it out into all the channels. The traditional channels, print channels, online channels, mobile channels, etc. So your brand lives in a lot of different places, and it's constantly evolving. Very, very quickly, if you've ever been through a branding process or think you're going to start with gathering a lot of disparate information, and sometimes it feels like these dots on the screens. Why do they want to talk to customers? Why do they care about this survey? Why do they want to come into my factory and see how the machine works? Because the more we can get all of these different pieces together, we can start to look for the commonalities, we can look for the threads and the themes, we can start to put together a brand. So a lot of times there's things like intakes and workshops, competitive analysis, a lot of information gathering. And the same is true if you are an individual. If you are looking for a job, or you're looking to get promoted, or you decide to go off on your own in your industry, You start to look at yourself as a brand and you say, what can people expect from me? What kind of experience can they have? What can I promise to deliver? It's all the same. For individuals, a lot of times that I tell people, look to performance reviews, look to testimonials, look to credentials that you have gained. Those are the places that you're going to start to get the feedback and the input on a personal brand. So once all that comes together, it all starts to get put together, and then we move into marketing speak. So if you have a marketing department or you hire an agency, they're going to put together something called a brand platform or a creative brief. And it's really just a short page that answers basic questions. It's something that generally gets shared throughout an organization so that everybody that works there can be consistent and talk about the brand in the same way. It might get down into key messages. What are the 3 things we always want to make sure that we talk about? We want to talk about maybe it's people's experience. We want to talk about why this is important. We want to talk about why something's different. And ultimately, you talk about how do we roll that brand out, whether it's the first time or whether it's an evolution and you're introducing something new. So that's a brand process. It's a lot of fun. That's very important. But as you can imagine, it's something that you have to go through before you start thinking about technology. It's sort of like you wouldn't say, boy, I need a Snapchat program and then figure this out. You're going to figure this out first and then move into your technology. You come up with statements. I'm suggesting one here. And by the way, I believe these slides are going to be available, or I'm happy to provide them. But we start out by just trying to write a very long-winded sentence. So this product, service, or organization is for people who, and you fill that in, what kind of audience, and they do such and such so that, and you kind of get through that piece. Creative briefs, you're answering a bunch of questions. Why are we communicating? What's important? Where are these people? Why is the idea important? Why is it relevant? A lot of questions. And I always say the questions are the answers. If you know the questions to ask, you will get to the answers. So the trifecta here. Strong brands are distinct. You can tell them apart. You know the difference between Burger King and McDonald's. You know the difference between Starbucks and Caribou and Dunn Brothers. And you can like them all for different reasons, but you'll know something different about them. They're relevant, or at least they are relevant to you. They are relevant to their key audience. It has to deliver something. So go back to that diffusion theory. People had awareness, they had interest, they tried it, they had to decide, is it for me? So a strong brand is always going to be relevant. And lastly, consistent. And this is really where I think the technology piece plays the greatest chance in whether that brand is going to be successful in a digital world. Because your brand is now all of a sudden going to be available anywhere and everywhere that you want it to be. The question becomes, does it need to be everywhere? Do you pick and choose? And usually the answer is, yeah, you don't want to try to be everywhere. You may end up in a lot of places, but pick the ones that matter. And the 3 questions when you're asking about brand, what do you do? What do you do better than everybody else? And why does it matter? Those 3 questions alone will get you to the essence of your brand. And then it's up to you. Deliver on that promise. Create that positive reputation. Okay, I'm going to shift and start to talk about how technology intersects here. And as I said, I'm very excited because I have some current data. So, we are spending, as organizations, as companies, more on technology today than we ever have. And the real focus is on mobile, anything mobile. Why? Because we spend less time in front of a desktop and more time with some sort of handheld smart device. So mobile's where it's at. When you start to work with a designer or a web programmer, you want to make sure, and they're probably going to tell you, let's make sure that we have a mobile app to go with this. Don't skimp on that. Make sure that it works on mobile. I'll also say, realize that whatever you put out there, it's going to look different on every device. So it is hard to attain that consistency just because there are so many variations. And so trust your technology experts to guide you through the ones that make the most sense to you. Analytics is also really key. One of the nice things about being able to do business in a digital world is you have immediate feedback. You know if people engaged, you know if people saw it, you know how many people. And so today, as we gather more and more intelligence, analytics is a place that people are starting to pay more money in terms of the spending. Interestingly though, in this survey, and this was of communications professionals, they said in the workplace among employees, it doesn't seem that there is a really good strategy. It's almost like people are saying, well, we better do this because it exists. We better apply technology. And so again, thinking back to how do we apply strategy to what we're doing and the choices that we're making. Email in the workplace is still probably the most consistent way of communicating, although we are starting to see a lot of messenger type programs happening so that customers, employees, etc., are either using texting or they're using some sort of internal messenger system. It's becoming more and more prevalent, and it's creating more and more opportunities for organizations to decide what's our protocol and how do we do that. We're seeing lots more social media, we're seeing lots more collaboration, and our younger generations, remember Gen Z is coming into the workplace, they spend most of their time on a small screen that they hold in their hands. So we have to be thinking about how we communicate across different generations and different technology needs. So what types of technology use are up for 2018? Messaging technology, huge increase from 14% to 42%. Mobile, social collaboration, and social media usage nearly doubled. Those are the areas where people are spending most of their time getting their information. So when I referenced reading an article in the newspaper this morning, confession, I did not read that article in a paper. I read it on a social media platform that took me to the website for the newspaper. That's happening more and more often, where the originating medium is not necessarily the channel where you got the information, but you got it filtered through another platform, or through a referral. And so that's happening more and more too. Technology spending, mobile has the most, analytics the next. I was a little bit surprised to only see a 4% increase in spending on video, but that's the third one. That's the third area where there's a lot of spending, because anymore we don't want 2D interactions. We want something that's moving, we want something that's got sound, and so video is increasing. Consumer use. Although our smart devices are really smart, and they can do everything for us. I have an organization that I'm working with that has a smart water technology. It will help you detect leaks, it will tell you about the amount of water that you're using, it will help you monitor the water use in residential and potentially in the future in commercial properties. So it's pretty cool, and you can run it from a mobile device. There are all kinds of mobile devices, but even though we have all this cutting edge technology, most consumers are pretty much just dipping their toe in the water. We're using the most basic aspects of whatever it can do. So think about it. Within different social media platforms, most of us know how to post a picture and post a little something to go along with it, maybe on Instagram or Twitter. But are we taking advantage of the opportunity to do polling? Are we taking advantage of the opportunity to do geo-targeting or to do advertising or to boost things? There's a lot more that goes along with it, and we're a bit averse to it. With some of the voice-aided assistants out there, so Alexa, the most common things that people ask are to turn on their music or turn off their music. And yet this thing will do virtually anything you want it to do. People are hesitant yet to ask it to buy something online. We still want to have that experience or go on and click ourselves. And if it comes down to texting versus asking your device to send the text, for example, in the car, if I want to say, hey, text David, see you next week at the PRSA meeting, I'm going to probably wait until I park and I'm going to get out my phone and I'm going to send it manually. But the takeaway here is the technology exists for us to be able to do things and for our brands to exist in a lot of different ways. So I thought this last quote was pretty telling. The biggest hurdle for me has been awareness. Coming back to diffusion theory, just knowing what something can do, like understanding what I'll be able to do with these devices. And so we tend to be very cautious. And that's okay, because that's probably the best way to just try something out, add a feature, start to use a little bit more. Virtual reality, that's something else that we hear about today. And virtual reality is really taking things from a 2D into a 3D option. It's having somebody pop up on your screen and start talking to you live time, like a customer service rep. It's being able to take somebody on a tour of something. It's almost like being there. It's really cool from a customer perspective because you're beginning to get into that experience level. So think about that pyramid of branding, and we had organizational, and we had all of the different channels, and then we took it to the experience level. Virtual reality is beginning to give us a new way to have that connection with a prospective customer or a prospective employee or anyone that's a prospect of our target audience. It's giving us a new way to tell stories because all of a sudden we are starting to get that face-to-face, and we're beginning to believe that we are having an honest and very personal interaction with that brand, with that individual because of it. And it really increases the innovation. And so it allows organizations to start to look at new ways of showcasing what they can do for people. For answering that brand question, why does it matter? What do we do better? It gives you that opportunity to do that. So some of the tips, quality content. Quality is always more important than quantity. At the end of the day, you want to be able to tell the best story in the best possible way. Don't try to put all the bells and whistles on it the first time around. Just try it out. Get a little bit going in there. Make or break that experience. People are going to engage more when there is that opportunity for virtual reality because it gives them a chance to play with it and try it out. The metrics continue to evolve. What we've been able to gather today is just the baseline. Right now, we are finding that there are more and more ways to measure everything. It still comes back to the old adage, just because you can measure it, should you measure it, or is it important? So same old thing, we could go around and do a survey in this room of what kind of shoes people have on, and we would get lots of information. But whether that information was relevant or helpful or would advance the cause, really depends what the objective was. The same thing is true with technology and analytics. It can measure lots of different things, but you need to be able to drive it back to your business goals and objectives so that you can have it be relevant. And then, I loved this in the survey, virtual reality needs a PR strategy. The reason that's in there is because if you fail to build relationships, so I talked about brand, relationships, and reputation. Relationships are the conduit between the brand and the reputation. Relationships are the part that make or break whether or not that promise was kept and whether or not people know about it. And so as we incorporate technology, and in particular some of these more personal technologies like AI and VR, we want to not lose sight of the relationship piece, and that's really where the public relations comes in, because we can tell the stories and we can get to know those audiences and tailor the information to them. So any brand can make use of it. The real question is on quality content and engagement, because the possibilities are endless, and we should be taking advantage of that. So benefits. 89% of executives believe that technology is impacting their business. They're thinking about it. They are trying to figure it out. I have heard lots and lots of companies say that they're no longer a product or service company. They're really technology companies that offer a product or service. Ride-sharing things like Uber or Lyft, they don't see themselves as being a taxi company. They see themselves as being a technology company that provides transportation. Amazon is a technology company that provides all manner of goods and services. Technology companies. And so the more that our organizations embrace technology, the faster we're going to bring products and services to market. The more that we are going to streamline logistics, because we have to. How else are you going to get your Amazon order this afternoon? It has to be streamlined. And it also levels the playing field. So for the first time, thanks to technology, small businesses, mid-sized businesses can compete on a playing field that is leveled with the big giants. And it's all going to come down to that brand and technology. How did you tell your story, and what kind of technology did you use to get it out there? So brand is really at the center of the communication. It builds the relationships, and it helps you be proactive. One thing I'm going to toss in here, and just this would be a whole other series of conversations, is the impact that technology can have on your reputation in a situation of risk or crisis. And it could even just be a perceived one. What happens when somebody has a negative experience? They generally tell somebody about it. And the most common way that people tell people about it, especially if it's a negative experience, is they tell them about it on a social platform. This spreads like wildfire. So the time to build your reputation, the time to get your story straight, is long before there's a disgruntled customer or disgruntled employee. You want to have all of that understanding of your mission, vision, values. You want to have that consistent look and feel. You want to have consistency to the story that you tell out there, so that when things rise and issues come out, you can be managing those issues before they become crises, and perhaps they won't even become crises. There's a statistic that says more than 90% of crises that happen within an organization are things that the organization knew about but either chose to not pay attention to, or they didn't know how to handle it. So a high percentage of the crises that happen was something that existed that could have been addressed, could have been issues management instead of crisis response. Technology can really help you. So think about this. If there's a recall, if there's a change, if there's a disaster, technology is going to help you get that message out there quicker, more consistently, and in a manner that is going to help your organization forward. And that's another reason that I encourage organizations to really think about the technological side of their brand strategy, because you want to have it ready to go, and you don't want it to be the first time that you have tried to fly that airplane. So how do you move forward? I guess one of the first things I would say is curiosity, and to develop that futurist mindset. Things aren't going to slow down when it comes to change and technology. We're just going to see more and more of it. It's mind-boggling. But the more you kind of think forward and say, okay, this is happening. What's the impact going to be on my organization, on my brand, on me as an individual? And start to add things in, one at a time. Do not try to rehab the entire thing. Pick something. Give it a try. Maybe it's artificial intelligence or virtual reality. Those seem to be the areas where most organizations are heading. And they're big and broad, but that's the trend. Find courses, go online, read books, come to things like this, ask questions. And remember, you don't have to be the technology guru. You just need to know what it can do for you, and you can find the people that have the technology experience to be able to make your idea come to life and to do it well. Start experimenting. Pilot program, let's try it in one market. Let's try it with one product. Let's try it at one trade show. Let's try it at one event. Let's just see. That is the place where you can dip your toe in the water. A few years ago, I started playing around with a community service idea. And I thought, this is going to be my playground. And let me tell you, it was. It was a time that I began using Twitter. I began using all kinds of blogging and social media and interaction, virtual interaction. And it was a great playground because the stakes weren't high. I could give it a try. I could see what happened. I could learn from it. And it was perfect. Then adopt what works, bring it into your business, bring it into your life. Make that choice. Is it something I'm going to keep? Did it work? Am I going to move forward on that diffusion theory? So just take a little bit and then get feedback. Find out from people. What was your experience like with it? Did it build confidence? Did it bring you back? We can do so much surveying now to find out how it's working, and then just make those tweaks and adjustments, because technology is going to help you connect with your audience. So technology and branding. Like I said, it's going to continue to change. It's going to offer us new ways of doing things, but the most important thing is to know what it can do and whether or not that's what you want to do. Match it up. And then stay true to your brand. You want to convey it consistently and thoughtfully in the channels that matter most. So know your audience. Never more important to just know who your audience is. Grandma is not on Twitter. Grandma's not on Snapchat yet. Maybe they will be, or maybe there will be something totally new. But know your audience and pick the technology that supports it. So with that, I'm going to open up for some questions. Dave's about, are you asking a question or are you?
I will ask you a question.
All right.
And it involves reputation and technology. We've got this platform called Facebook. And Facebook has not managed its reputation well. What impact do you sense that has had on its usefulness as a tool for businesses? And what should we do about that?
Well, I'll start with the very Minnesota response. Facebook is an interesting situation. The question becomes, does Facebook have a PR crisis? They do now, or they did, but it really started out as an operational crisis, and they were slow to respond to it, so it became an image and a reputation issue, which takes me back to know what's happening in your organization so that you can be proactive and address things, or at least keep an eye on what's going on. That's certainly one place that technology helps, is being able to watch what's happening among your competitive set, among your peers, just in the marketplace in general. So Facebook, okay. What does that mean for our businesses? It means that we have to make some careful decisions about whether we trust having our brands represented there, whether we feel good about doing business. It's the same questions you would ask of any platform. I do think that Facebook has gotten very deep. It is very much infiltrated into our society and our way of communicating. And so my hope is that they're going to adapt and evolve and be responsive versus go away. But it does create an opportunity for somebody else to come in and create a better platform or something that people would trust more, because they broke the trust. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you for coming today. This has been extremely interesting. I think most of us would all agree that we've learned something today. You mentioned geo-branding, but I've also heard about geofencing. And so my question to you is, number one, if you want to just explain it briefly, but number two, when are certain companies or marketing strategies kind of crossing a privacy line? Meaning, just because you're walking by something, all of a sudden, companies are notified, they know that you're there, they're going to send you some sort of communication saying, hey, look over here. I mean, so my question would be, is this just the way it is moving forward? Does technology have its own train, it's just moving down the road, or is there something that we can do, make decisions where we can either play in that field or not?
So geo-branding versus geo-fencing. And the idea is, in geo-branding, you're deciding exactly where you want to place your message. Geo-fencing, somewhat similar in that you're making that decision, but it is automating a response or automating a communication to somebody just because they happen to walk by, or because you put something in your shopping cart at Zappos and then didn't actually purchase it, so it keeps popping up in your feed no matter where you go. It's following you. I think it's up to us to decide how we want to do it. Like most industries, technology is going to adapt, and it's going to have to decide what fits and what doesn't fit. And it's up to us as consumers and as businesses to make some of those decisions. Like anything, and you could look at healthcare, we could look at financial services. If an industry doesn't self-regulate, then it will become a regulated industry. So the more that we can do to be smart and to be public with our policies and talk about how we use data or don't use data, the more we're going to build the trust and we're going to keep things on the up and up. If we let it go, then yeah, then it will run amok. Yeah, please.
In your experience, what are the best analytics platforms to use, analytics tools to use?
There are quite a few, and again, it really depends on what you're trying to measure. Some of the most basic ones, Google Analytics is phenomenal. We're increasingly becoming a Google-centric world, and so that's going to be probably the one that's going to give you the most consistent and the broadest type of analytics. But you can go into things. Hootsuite is one that a lot of people are really comfortable with because you can post and track across different social platforms. And it does seem like every day there's some sort of new analytics piece coming up. So part of it depends on whether you're doing marketing analytics, whether you're trying to do web analytics, whether you're trying to get at reputation or sentiment. So know what you're trying to measure before you pick the measurement tool, and don't buy more than you need. Any other questions?
Yeah, please. I was talking to a friend whose company is a social media, content marketing, a lot of video, like CRM kind of tools to track and whatnot. And it was interesting because in speaking to her, she said that all postings should have the end result of bringing someone to the website. Is that always the end result? Because I didn't think that. I always thought, well, if you're doing a posting to build a brand, it might be about trust, it might be the image, telling the story. But her point was that anything you do should always be bringing them back to the company website. Is that, would you think that, because I think having that goal, it certainly helps in how you're positioned, but I didn't know if that was really the end result that you're hoping for.
It tends to be the common one in that websites are the hub of information for an organization or a brand. Again, part of it's going to depend on what that call to action is and whether or not getting them to the website is the right thing. You may want to bypass the website and get them right into the pipeline of talking to the fundraising person at your nonprofit, or right into the store to buy something if you're bricks and mortar. So I think that in general, the premise there is you want to drive them to the hub of your organization's activity, and if you want the website to be the hub, then that is a great place and it's a very trackable place. But the bottom line is to think about what the outcome is that you want to achieve and to build your technology and build your marketing to get that outcome. Yes?
Hashtag use.
Oh.
Talk a bit about that, pros, cons, techniques, strategies.
Hashtags are on the rise. We were all curious what a hashtag was a few years ago, the pound sign and some words after it. That curiosity turned into a bunch of people using them and not really knowing why and how and what. Then we kind of came into everybody using them, and you'll see posts where people have multiple hashtags and too many hashtags and they make them up and it's one big long line. Hashtags are very helpful because they are filters. Hashtags are really helpful if you try to build consensus around something. But again, just like a good brand, be consistent with your hashtag. So as a company or an individual, have a couple that you use, but don't overuse them. We recently worked with some organizations on National Small Business Week, and we had a hashtag Small Helps All, the idea that small businesses help everyone in a community with jobs and with economics. And so we used that Small Helps All to bring everything together so that people could find and participate. But we could have been like, small business is cool, buy at small businesses, shop local. No, just come up with the one that's really central and use it with purpose and integrity. But hashtags are very helpful because then people can find and search, and you can create something unique. And I see my, one more. Please.
I love the fact when you say if you're going to introduce something, try and take a small piece and introduce a little bit at a time. You know, when you get excited about something, it's a small business, and when you get excited about something, it's like you want to do it all, and you want to do it now, and you want to do it fast, and you're just hoping it's right. And then there's all the bad effect that we did as well, it didn't really work out. So I really liked it. I think that's a really good point about.
I would encourage, just try a little bit and add to it. If there's one thing I've seen across the organizations that we work with, and these range from very small to very large organizations, is that everybody is in the try it and see what happens phase. And that didn't exist a few years ago. It used to be, well, we want a guarantee before we try something. We need to be sure. Today, there's much greater comfort with, you know what, we saw this, we see it happening in other industry, what happens if? And so even the companies with the biggest budgets and the biggest brands are trying something and maybe even piloting it with one channel, as I said, one trade show, one something. But I will also caution you, don't make up your mind just because it didn't work the first time. Give it time. You don't build an audience, you don't build engagement overnight, and you won't know just because of one thing. Oh, nobody liked it, therefore it wasn't a good idea. Try it a few times, make tweaks, then come back to it. Thank you. Thank you all for your questions. I am going to stick around, so if anyone has additional questions, just come find me.